At 37,000 feet, cruising smoothly over the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, a Boeing 747 carrying 248 souls suddenly faced an unthinkable nightmare. One by one, all four engines failed, leaving the massive aircraft gliding silently through the dark night sky. Inside the cabin, terrified passengers gripped their seats, staring into the darkness, while in the cockpit, the crew struggled to comprehend what was happening. Their instruments showed no engine power, no thrust, and no way to climb or maintain altitude. The only sounds were the rushing wind and the heartbeats of those on board. In that chilling silence, Captain Eric Moody made a calm yet unforgettable announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a small problem. All four engines have stopped. We are doing our damnedest to get them going again. I trust you are not in too much distress." This is the incredible true story of British Airways Flight 9, also known as the Jakarta Incident, a flight that encountered a deadly volcanic ash cloud, an invisible danger that turned a routine journey into a fight for survival. Before we dive deep into this gripping tale, subscribe to Aviation Black Box for more true stories of air disasters, near misses, and heroic acts in the sky. Now, let's uncover how a near-certain tragedy was turned into one of the most astonishing survivals in aviation history. British Airways Flight 9, the Jakarta Incident. On the night of June 24, 1982, British Airways Flight 9, a Boeing 747-236B, known as City of Edinburgh, prepared for what was expected to be a routine journey. The flight's itinerary was straightforward, departing from London Heathrow, stopping briefly in Bombay, now Mumbai, India, and then Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, before heading to Perth, Australia, and finally ending its journey in Auckland, New Zealand. On board were 248 passengers and crew, many of them families traveling to Australia and New Zealand for vacations or to visit relatives. The atmosphere at Kuala Lumpur International Airport was calm and warm as passengers boarded the massive Boeing 747 for the next leg of their trip, a night flight to Perth. Among the crew were Captain Eric Moody, a highly experienced pilot known for his calm demeanor and precise flying skills, First Officer Roger Greaves, and Flight Engineer Barry Townley Freeman. These men were a seasoned team, confident and ready for what seemed like an ordinary flight. Little did they know, this night would test their courage, skill, and humanity like never before. Chapter 1. A Smooth Departure. At 8:42 p.m. local time, Flight 9 roared down the runway and smoothly lifted into the night sky. The climb was uneventful. In the passenger cabin, dinner was being served, and many passengers were settling into their seats for the long journey ahead. The pilots navigated the massive aircraft toward Jakarta, their next waypoint, cruising at 37,000 feet over the vast Indian Ocean. The weather reports were excellent. There were no thunderstorms, no heavy turbulence, and no signs of trouble anywhere on their radar screens. The night outside was calm, the sky clear, and the stars brilliant against the blackness. But hidden from view over the island of Java, a silent and invisible threat was waiting. Chapter 2. The Invisible Danger. Unbeknownst to the crew and passengers, Mount Glugging, a volcano located about 110 miles southeast of Jakarta, had erupted earlier that evening. Volcanic ash billowed miles into the sky, spreading silently across the upper atmosphere. Unlike smoke or storm clouds, volcanic ash doesn't appear on weather radar. To the cockpit crew, the skies ahead appeared perfectly clear, and their instruments showed nothing unusual. At approximately 9:40 p.m., Flight 9 entered the volcanic ash cloud, but no one realized it. At first, there were small signs that something wasn't right. A faint smell of sulfur or burnt rubber began to seep into the cabin. Passengers noticed a thin haze forming in the air. The flight attendants reassured everyone, thinking it might just be cabin smoke or minor issues with the air systems. In the cockpit, the crew began to notice something far more concerning. A strange static glow appeared on the windscreen and engine inlets. The pilot saw what looked like tiny blue sparks dancing across the wings, a phenomenon known as St. Elmo's fire. It looked beautiful, almost like a surreal lightning display, but it was a warning sign of severe atmospheric disturbance. The crew discussed what it could mean, but before they could take action, the first real emergency struck. Chapter 3. The first engine failure. At 10:42 p.m., there was a sudden, loud bang. The pilots felt a powerful shudder run through the aircraft. Warning lights flashed on the control panel. Engine number 4 had failed. Standard procedure kicked in. Engine failures on a 747 were serious but manageable. With 3 remaining engines, the plane could still fly safely. The crew began following the checklist to secure the failed engine and restart it. But before they could complete the steps, another bang echoed through the cockpit. Then another and another. Within 2 terrifying minutes, all 4 engines failed completely. Chapter 4. Silence at 37,000 feet. The Boeing 747, one of the most powerful aircraft in the world, was now nothing more than a giant glider. The sudden silence was shocking. The deep roar of the jet engines was replaced by a quiet rushing of air past the fuselage. In the cabin, panic erupted. Passengers began to cry, scream, and pray. Some clutched their loved ones tightly, while others sat frozen in shock. In the cockpit, the situation was dire. Without engine power, the plane could not maintain altitude. Many critical systems began to fail. The crew had no thrust, no way to climb, and very limited options. First Officer Greaves quickly calculated their descent rate. At their eyeshore current glide, they had approximately 23 minutes before hitting the ocean. Captain Moody, displaying incredible composure, picked up the PA system and made what would become one of the most famous announcements in aviation history. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a small problem. All 4 engines have stopped. We are doing our damnedest to get them going again. I trust you are not in too much distress. Despite the horrifying situation, his calm, almost understated tone gave passengers a strange sense of hope. Chapter 5. Fighting for survival. The crew immediately began emergency restart procedures. They followed every checklist. They attempted multiple restart sequences. They tried windmilling the engines using the rushing air as the plane descended. Nothing worked. The volcanic ash had entered the engines and melted inside them, clogging turbines and cutting off all power. To make matters worse, the cockpit windows were sandblasted opaque by the microscopic ash particles. The crew could barely see outside, relying almost entirely on instruments to navigate. Captain Moody decided to turn the aircraft back toward Jakarta, their nearest airport. The crew radioed a Mayday distress call, declaring a complete loss of engines. Air traffic controllers in Jakarta were stunned. A 747 with no engines was unheard of. Chapter 6. A Glimmer of Hope. As Flight 9 descended through 13,000 feet, something miraculous happened. Engine number 4 suddenly roared back to life. The crew quickly attempted restarts, on the other three engines. Engine 3 came back online, followed moments later by Engine 1. Engine 2 briefly surged, but then failed again. Now, with 3 working engines, the crew had just enough power to stabilize the descent and attempt a safe landing. But there was still a massive problem. The cockpit windows were almost completely opaque. The pilots couldn't see the runway. Landing a 747 under these conditions would be nearly impossible. Chapter 7. The Final Approach. As the plane neared Jakarta's Halim Perdana Kusuma Airport, Captain Moody relied on instruments and the faint glow of runway lights, visible through tiny clear patches on the windshield. The crew executed a precision instrument approach, relying on their skill and coordination. The descent was tense and terrifying. In the cabin, passengers sat in complete silence, bracing for impact. Finally, the landing gear locked into place. The runway lights grew closer. The plane descended steadily. At 11:45 p.m., British Airways Flight 9 touched down safely, skidding along the runway before coming to a full stop. Cheers and tears erupted in the cabin. Passengers hugged one another and wept. Against impossible odds, all 248 people on board had survived. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. Once safely on the ground, investigators inspected the aircraft. What they found was staggering. The leading edges of the wings and nose were severely sandblasted. The cockpit windshields were frosted and opaque. All 4 engines were badly damaged internally by melted volcanic ash. The cause was confirmed. Mount Glugging's eruption had created an invisible volcanic ash cloud that the plane had unknowingly flown through. Chapter 9. Legacy and Lessons Learned. This incident changed aviation forever. Procedures were created for detecting and avoiding volcanic ash clouds. Pilots were trained on how to respond to multiple engine failures caused by ash. International systems were set up to track volcanic activity and warn flights in real time. Captain Moody and his crew were hailed as heroes for their unbelievable skill and calmness under pressure. The flight became a legendary story in aviation history, known simply as the Jakarta Incident. Epilogue. The passengers of Flight 9 returned home to their families, forever grateful for the crew that saved them. Many described it as a near-death experience, a moment where life and death balanced on the edge of a wing. Today, British Airways Flight 9 serves as a powerful reminder of the hidden dangers of our planet and the extraordinary human courage that can turn near-certain disaster into a miraculous survival. And it stands as proof that even in the darkest of skies, there is always hope.